This sample will be for denim. So for denim, you typically want to do a flat felled seam so that all of the seam allowances and the raw edges are encased, and it also makes for a more durable seam since it has 2 stitch lines. So with denim, you will need to use a heavyweight needle. So in our case, that'll be a size 90 needle. For a very lightweight denim, you can use a standard cotton thread, all-purpose thread. But for anything that's medium or heavyweight, you'll need to use a heavy thread. So I'm going to change it out in just a second, but I've got a heavyweight thread here ready to use on my denim. And that makes for, again, more durable seams. Denim typically has a lot of wear and tear put on it. We wear tight jeans these days, and so your body is constantly putting stress on those seams, and then also just the friction of your body as you walk, as you sit. Those seams are going to go through a lot of wear and tear, so they need to be durable enough to stand up to that, and multiple washes as well. So cut out your same rectangle pattern that we've got and we've been using so far. Grain line going vertically down the piece. And again, 3 sides are pinked, and then the one side that we're going to stitch on is cut with my straight shears. Okay, I've got my needle and my thread changed out to that heavier weight, and now I'm ready to start stitching. I've got my pieces of fabric pinned together, wrong sides together. This is a pretty heavyweight denim that I'm working with, so I'm going to widen my flat felled to 3/4 of an inch. So stitch 3/4 of an inch first. So this is where we're at right now. A little bit hard to see on that colored thread. Okay, now we're ready to head to our sewing machine and press this. Or to our ironing board, excuse me. Okay, as always, bust open our seam first. So open up those 2 layers and open up your 2 seam allowances. And press that really well so you get a nice crease down the center. This is a very heavyweight denim that I'm working with, so I'm going to press it for a little while longer, make sure that it stays. If your fabric is resisting the press and it wants to pop up, then a good way to kind of set it into place is to allow it to cool while you've got some weight holding it open. So you can put a book on top of it and walk away and let it cool. But as long as it's warm whenever you pick it up, it will release that press. So a fabric that is wanting to pop up, so you can see mine's popping up a little bit. It was much worse before I started to hold it down and let it cool. But any fabric like that, wools can be the same way, thick denims, any thick fabric will try to resist a press. So you can use that technique where you just put weight on top of it and let it cool while it's being held down. It's kind of hot to do with your hands. That's why I say put a book on top, because I don't want you to burn your hands. Okay, now I'm ready to trim my seam allowance that will be on the bottom. So both of these will get eventually pressed over to the right. So this one on the left, or sorry, on the right is going to be on the bottom. So I'm going to trim that down to a quarter, or sorry, to a ½ inch, not a quarter. Okay, so I started with 3/4 inch, so I took off a quarter, left a half. Okay, now press that other one over on top to the right. Okay, and then we're going to take this raw edge of the top one and turn it under a 1/4 inch. So I should have a ½ inch left visible. So turn it under 1/4 inch. So you're kind of wrapping it around. You can see where this bottom one is. I'm going to kind of wrap that 1/4 inch around that shorter one that we trimmed. Use your sewing gauge to make sure that you've got a nice even ½ inch along the full seam. Where'd mine go? So mine's here. Move that little slider to the ½ inch mark and then double check your measurement before you press it so that it is consistent and even. Let that sit there for a second so it can try to convince that thick fabric to stay down. Okay, now you'll probably need some pins to hold it in place until you get to sew it, because it may want to pop up on you, even if you've pressed it. Okay, there we go. And now I'm ready to go do my top stitch. Okay, so I've got my pressed seam here. Now we're going to do a top stitch just along the edge, so it's a top stitch and an edge stitch. Just along that folded edge, as close as we can get to that folded edge down the length of our seam. So now we've got, excuse me, here we go. We've got that stitched, so edge stitch over here. We stitched it this way just a second ago. So edge stitch over here by the folded edge, and then our original stitch line. So that should look extremely familiar, like the edge of your denim jeans. So this is a very common stitch for, or seam for, denim materials. It's super durable because it's got the 2 stitch lines, and all of your raw edges are encased in there. And this is what it looks like from the inside.